Nev Gallus is my only shot at finding the Dreadwolf. I'm not leaving until I know where she is. Be ready to talk by the time I get to you.
Darling, you're adorable. Not enough gold in the world for this.
Varric, now!
Meet Bianca. She'd like you to stay a while.
I finally got my hands on Dragon Age The Veilguard, and I did a full playthrough over on my Twitch stream, link is below, which means we can finally do a review of the game. Has BioWare returned to form and gained faith from at least this long time BioWare supporter, or is Dragon Age The Veilguard a step backwards? Today, we put Dragon Age The Veilguard on the scales of Judgement. What's going on, everybody? Your boy Anubis here with a brand new video guys today. Welcome to the channel. I hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all in good health mentally and physically. The first thing we have to touch on is the character creator of the game. BioWare has always been one of the best at providing a well-detailed character creator, so surely it wouldn't be different here. For the most part, it is a solid character creator. I think the UI could be, better, and the lack of interaction with the Dragon Age Keep didn't give me much faith going forward. At the same time, it just seemed like they tried to streamline how the character creator works for Dragon Age, and this is more of like a personal taste kind of thing, rather than that you do or don't like that. Because it's kind of like with some of the Mass Effect games. You have more detail in some Mass Effect games and less detail in others. Even with previous Dragon Age games, there's more detail here, less detail there. But generally, it is a good character creator, except with one race, the Qunari. The Qunari options don't look good. In general, the Qunari in this game don't look good. Now, understand BioWare has always changed how races look in the game. In Dragon Age Origins, Sten, our Qunari companion, was just a large brown-skinned dude, and that's it. In Dragon Age 2, we got to redesign the Qunari to be more unique, but lore was given to as to why Sten looked different from the other Qunari that we see in Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition. The Qunari in Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition have an intimidating look towards them. They look like they should be taken serious. Like they literally all literally all of the actual Qunari look like walking one-man armies just by themselves. Avenger level threats is how they look. Like just each individual Qunari looks like an Avenger level threat. Whether it's the Edershock, a Sarabas, Talvashok, Armbull, or whoever. The Qunari look menacing and intimidating and badass. In the Veilguard, though, particularly the character creator, but also just in general, the way the Qunari look, it looks like they ran the Qunari through a Disney pretty boy filter. Now, Dragon Age isn't new to changing designs. As mentioned before, Qunari look different in every game, but also just in general, Dragon Age always goes through changes. Art design is always different, combat mechanics are always different, how the open world is always different. Each Dragon Age game is different from the other. So when I saw that people were complaining about Veilguard's gameplay changes and other changes, my thought was, are y'all new? Like, if y'all want a deep dive on all Dragon Age games without having to replay them yourself, check out Noah Caldwell Jervis. Hope I pronounced his last name correctly. If I didn't know, I apologize. His recent retrospective on Dragon Age. It's about 6 hours long, but well worth the listen. Put it on while you're playing the game and just listen. But even though it's common for each game to differ from the other, it is still valid to not like the design changes. It is okay to prefer how Darkspawn looked in Dragon Age Origins compared to how they look in Inquisition. But let's shift gears to talk about the companions before talking about the story of Veilguard. The companions are a big part of BioWare's history. They are known as a studio who creates compelling companions we, the player, emotionally connect with and love. Part of why Andromeda failed and got so much bad feedback was because people could not connect with the companions outside of Drac. Your first full companion you meet is a returning character, Lace Harding, also known as Scout Harding, a familiar face from Dragon Age Inquisition, but also a familiar voice, voiced by Ali Hillis, who is the voice of Liara in BioWare's Mass Effect games. Lace is a dwarven archer, whom kind of acts as the team's emotional support rogue. She's a great character and well acted, Also has very interesting, companion quest lines that involves her becoming, magically imbued with the power from the Dwarven Titans. This is massive for the future of Dragon Age potential plot lines. More than any companion, she could be massive in a future DLC or a future game. Next up is Nev, a magic detective whom is likely the most romance character in the game. Nev is a character whom, when I first saw her, I didn't know what to expect. I had a feeling she might be a boring character. She doesn't start off that way, and she does start off that way. She's well voice acted, and her writing is pretty solid, but her quests aren't as impactful as, say, Harding's. But it doesn't take away from her character herself, being good. Then we have Balar, whom from the first word spoken, I knew she'd be one of the more disliked characters in the game. Not because she's poorly written or bad character by herself, but because she has a certain personality type that will push people away. She's a lot, for less better words, a lot of energy, very Sarah-like, very Phoebe-like, even kind of like, drunk Tally to a degree. She's quirky. Because of that, Balar can be annoying at first if those kind of personalities bother you. For me, I initially didn't care for her, but as the game went on, she grew on me. Not enough to be, regularly on missions with me. That ended up being like, just Nev and Darvin, but I did grow to like her character enough to not hate her. Next, we meet up with Lucanus, a member of the well-known assassin family, the Antivan Crows. Which, side note, Zevran not being in the game to some degree is a huge L. You have a lot of Antivan Crows involved in this game. They're a massive faction of the game's main plot. Meanwhile, you don't have one of the longest running Antivan Crow characters in the game's theory. Yes, you can kill him off, and my imagination, my guess would be BioWare didn't want to like have multiple plot lines where there's a dead Zevran or an alive Zevran. It seems like they wanted this one game to exist in its own bubble, which is probably why they also didn't include the Dragon Age Keep, and why they also, for the most part, don't do too much to mention what goes on in other Dragon Age games other than some cameos. Lucanus is an interesting guy. He's a generic sad boy trope type character, and also, a repeat idea. He is possessed by a demon. Think Anders' possession with Justice in Dragon Age 2. As in, it's more a mutual partnership more so than a full takeover. Though a plot thread is a demon known as Spite wanting full control of Lucanus if he can't get free himself. Which, with Anders, that's never something that we really saw. We never saw Justice want to take full control. Even when it comes to Ren in Dragon Age 1, aka Origins, she also was, in a mutual partnership with the Spirit, but we never saw that Spirit want to take over Wen. But Lucanus and Spite, they are binded. Though the sad boy trope is kind of weak in repeating the Anders and Justin character, but demon instead of Spirit, Lucanus is still a good character. Whenever I didn't have Darvin in my squad, Lucanus was in my squad. Much like Harding, Lucanus' companion quest is very good and felt so major to the entirety of Veilguard's overall story and world building. Then we have Darvin, a character I've mentioned twice so far in this video. Darvin is the generic blue boy warrior type character, which isn't necessarily a bad thing if done right. His skills, along with being a warrior, was why he was often in my squad, as my character is a rogue, so you kind of want some muscle around you, so you don't get bopped over the head too much by the enemies. So you kind of want a rogue with you, kind of want a warrior with you. As the saying goes, you want some beef. Darvin, while being a blue boy, is also kind of a sad boy too. He has a lot of sad emotional stories to tell, and his companion questline also strings along sadness. It doesn't have a happy ending up until a certain point in the main story and your own choices. But he's an overall solid character, as well as his partner in crime, Asan, your young griffin whom adds to Darvin's ability to be a good character through their bond. Next, we have Tosh. Much like Balar, this was a character from the moment I heard them speak. I knew they would be a character a lot of people wouldn't like, because Tosh is kind of a blunt asshole, but they are also a blunt asshole who also, being the token modern day character. AKA, Tosh will be seen as woke. Tosh is non-binary. A lot of their companion quests is about them acknowledging who they are and coping with their mother trying to accept who they are. Tosh isn't a bad character, but they do have some cringe dialogue moments, not necessarily in a way of, again, the woke, anti-woke kind of things, but like just the way she words things. But the way that, Tosh words things, the way that they word certain, phrases and the sentences used for Tosh just kind of makes you go, all right, that's kind of cringy. There were times during my stream of the game where every time Taj said something with a certain tone, I'd go, that's not going to be liked by the anti-woke weirdos. And yeah, they aren't going to be liked by a certain crowd. Those are things that I would say to my live stream whenever Tosh would speak, because quite oftenly they would say things that just was very, very modern. Let's go with that. Tosh campaign missions themselves are actually good, and like Malar, Tosh is someone who I grew to like as they got less annoying and the writing stopped being as cringy. Note, by the way, I don't think Tosh being non-binary or queer is a thing that makes them cringy. I don't want anyone to like watch this video or hear my dialogue and think that I'm calling being non-binary or a queer character as cringy. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the dialogue choices for the character can sometimes be cringy, nothing involving who they are as a person. It's just how some lines of dialogue are written and how the voice actor delivers those lines. Those particular lines make Tosh come off as a narcissistic, entitled, and an ass. But again, as the game goes on and Tosh as the character develops, they become a better character to have around. Character development matters, and Tosh is an example of good character development. Just having a character be the same from beginning to end with no growth is bad. Tosh has growth. Last but not least of the companions is Emmerich. Emmerich brings the old British swag to the team. He's lovely, easily a character who could become a lot of people's favorite character in the game. His voice acting is top shelf, his writing is great, his charm and elegance is fitting. His companion quest, well, is one to experience. Emmerich, as at face value, might not impress someone who hasn't played the game, but when you've gotten him in your squad and start doing missions, you learn quick why he's already a beloved character by the Dragon Age fanbase. And much like Tosh, Emmerich is a character who kind of has a little bit of coding to him, if you will, that you might not notice unless you pay close enough attention. Now that we talk about the companions, let's get into talk about the game's story. Dragon Age The Veilguard takes place 10 years after the events of Inquisition and finally takes us to Deventer, a location we've always heard of in Dragon Age but never got a chance to visit. Solus is finally starting his grand plan to restore the ancient elven world. To Solus, in order to do that, he has to cause destruction in a way a generic patriot villain does in shows like 24. AKA allow some people to suffer to achieve a greater good in his mind that he sees as the greater good. Solus doesn't initially see himself as being a bad guy. He sees himself as a hero. He sees what he's doing as necessity, a necessary action. During his attempt to destroy the Veil, he needs to remove 2 imprisoned elven gods. The moment our character, the returning Varric, Nev, and Hardy makes a move to stop Solus, disrupts his attempt and ends up freeing the 2 imprisoned gods. So, in a way, yeah, it's our character's fault for why the events of Veilguard is going to transpire. We caused evil gods to become free. Now, I do want to say I will not talk about Varric, as doing so steeps deeply into spoilers, and I want this video to be as spoiler free as possible. That's kind of how I do my reviews. I try to just avoid the big stuff. Most story things I will mention will be vague or not major. After the opening segment, we are tasked with recruiting help, not just from the companions we eventually get, but from factions in the same areas as those companions to recruit, which includes the Crows, the Veil Jumpers, Mournwatch, Shadow Dragons, the Wardens, and Lords of Fortune. We already know a great bit about the Crows and the Wardens, as both factions have been a constant presence in Dragon Age since Origins, but the rest are relatively new. The Veil Jumpers are explorers of ancient ruins, usually magically inclined, Dalish by origin, but does welcome non-Dalish explorers. They are experts on ancient elven artifacts and ancient elven magic. Mournwatch is a group from Navarra whom is tasked with protecting and maintaining the Grand Necropolis, a massive mausoleum for the undead. The Shadow Dragons are Deventer resistance group that basically hates the corrupt nature of the high society of Deventer. If you know Deventer, you know it's a nation okay with blood magic and slavery. These guys, the Shadow Dragons, don't like any of that. Lords of Fortune are a group of dungeon divers, treasure hunters, pirates if you will, but differ in their missions from being more about exploring ancient dungeons to find treasure instead of sailing the seas at a constant for treasure. They don't do that, but they're basically pirates. They also take on bounty missions from other nations and other people, to achieve the money to do their dungeon diving. Veilguard's story, in and of itself, is typical. It's typical BioWare, much like Shepard, the Inquisitor, Ryder, Hawk, and the Warwick Commander before you. Your character Rook is basically a diplomat. Like those mentioned main characters, you run around uniting groups, factions, nations, helping people who benefit your goal to obtain powers, be it magical or political. The game doesn't reinvent the wheel with how a Bioware story is told or paced. This is how all Bioware games are, even dating back to their Baldur's Gate games and their Knights of the Republic game. So if you generally like how Bioware tells their stories, you will enjoy Veilguard for the most part. It is not unique with how it behaves with its narrative. And that also can be seen as a negative. The fact that it kind of just toes the line and doesn't try to be anything special or unique or different could be seen as a negative for the game. The writing is inconsistent, which can be frustrating. It can be intriguing and then fall flat in some places. It's a weird game where, there are things it does better than the previous Dragon Age titles, but does worse than them too. Again, it's inconsistent. The world building is nice, the atmosphere is okay, but the connection you feel to the world isn't as strong as, say, Dragon Age 2, which had the benefit of being a smaller scale game with even more connection to NPCs and your own companions. Speaking of companions, to go back to talking about them in a comparison to Dragon Age 2, Veilguard lacks the type of banter previous games had. There is some, distrust between Lucanus and the rest of the team because of Demon's Bite, but, that's about it. It doesn't have the emotional type rope you get with Fenris, the baggage and moral conflict of Meryl, the sisterhood connection between Evelyn and Isabella that also sees them at each other's throats pretty often. But when it comes to defending each other, they're like sisters. The TLDR on this is the Veilguard's companions are very safe. There isn't the type of dynamic you experience in previous games. And if you're wondering why I solely picked Dragon Age 2 for this portion of the review, I think Veilguard is more comparable to DA2 than any other Dragon Age game, both in how the game flows, but also its reception. Dragon Age 2 received a lot of negative feedback when it released. It was hated, torn apart for changing how the combat was, changing how enemies looked, changing the graphical identity of the game, not having the hero Feroda, not having the same companion team, and for being a smaller scale game that reused a lot of assets and copy-pasted dungeons. Nowadays, Dragon Age 2 is remembered for better things. It's seen as a better game. You'll now hear people will be more positive about it than negative. But like Dragon Age 2, Veilguard's reception has not been great, and a lot of the comments are the exact same that they were for DA2. Changing the graphic identity, changing the combat, changing how enemies work, changing how enemies look, etc. Time will tell if the opinions people have about Veilguard will change. Its biggest negative reaction people have for Veilguard is, for its progressive tone and the anti-woke mob and grifters who make money off that mob treat Veilguard as some newly woke product. Clear signs that they've never played any previous Bioware games. Before talking about the world of Veilguard, I do want to briefly talk about the two main baddies of the game. As I said before, I won't go too deep into the story to avoid spoilers, and the same applies when talking about the two freed Elven gods. But we can't talk about who they are and their general goal. Gillanane, the mother of the White Hala, is the lesser of the two gods. She excels in navigation and the science behind the blight. Elganon, the All-Father, is the god of vengeance. Through game dialogue, you immediately get the sense that he is the superior of the two, and that he's using Gillanane for her mastering of the blight, but doesn't actually care for her at all. She's a means for his goal and nothing more. You also get the sense of just how powerful Elganon is through the conversation with Solus, whom gives off a fearful vibe when regarding Elganon. Getting into briefly talking about the world, as I mentioned before, the atmosphere and world building for Veilguard is good. There's variety in the locations you visit, and the blighted locations give off horror vibes with how grotesque everything looks, how grim, gloomy, and brutal things are and look. It captures the cool of Bioware to express how this blight is different from the blight we experienced in Dragon Age Origins. The combat of Veilguard is compact, much like Dragon Age Inquisition. It tries to be perfect blend of both action-heavy combat and strategy. It is good combat, but it does show some jank when playing on the hard difficulty as I did. At the same time, I think it is fair criticism to not like how streamlined the combat is when it comes to the abilities and skills. Much like Dragon Age 2 and even Mass Effect 2, Veilguard goes the less is more route when it comes to leveling and abilities. It's not widespread, it's not extensive, builds are even less unique. Overall, I think Dragon Age The Veilguard is a mixed bag of a game. It doesn't have its own identity as the previous games do. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, it excels at some things in comparison, but falls flat in others. When I mentioned When I was asked what do I think of Veilguard in my live stream of the game, my response was, it's like if Dragon Age 2 had more than 16 months to be developed. It is a good game, but it's not a unique game. It's a very safe game. None of the companions are truly unlikable unless you are a bigot, then you will hate Tosh for being non-binary, but they are all generally very safe to a point where it comes off like BioWare was afraid to do more with them since people responded negatively to Andromeda's companions. But from the beginning to end, it just feels like a safe game that doesn't do too much to wow the gamer gameplay-wise. The story does for the most part and provides, lore lovers with a lot of, to talk about, but if you're just a casual RPG gamer, you won't really feel much connection to the game and will move on to the next. The replay value is strictly only there for fans of the game who want to dive deep into the lore and replay as a different faction to see if things in small dialogue choices are different. As good as the game is and can be, it just gives off the vibes of not being ambitious enough. Again, likely out of fear of the reception, fear of not pleasing EA enough to keep BioWare from being another studio close by them. It has already been stated that Veilguard will not have DLC, making it the first Dragon Age to not have one, which is massive considering that each of the 3 previous games have expansions with massive implications on the game's lore and future. Veilguard has a cliffhanger ending via narration and it is an intriguing ending. But will it be enough to provide us, the player, with what we want out of Dragon Age as a story? Are we just to sit with that until a new full entry is released? There isn't enough there to make us feel like Dragon Age has a future. It feels like Veilguard failed and Dragon Age should be killed off by EA. If this is the end of Dragon Age, it will be a sad death of a franchise that has so much going for it and promise. My score for Dragon Age Veilguard is a 7 out of 10. It is a good game, but it does suffer from its inconsistencies, frustrations, and bleak future. You are left wanting more from choices you've made in previous games. The exclusion of the keep is the biggest flaw to me. All choices in BioWare games are an investment, and the lack of world states being used is a small middle finger to the fans. It doesn't take away from what the game does well, as safe as the game is with how it plays out. Its big plot points are nice, and the massive outcome for at least one companion is big. It's a joy to explore the locations in the game, but also lacks memorable NPCs. The ones you'll remember for the most are the ones who were in previous games, and not the new ones. So, that is pretty much all I have to say about Dragon Age Veilguard as of right now after playing the game. I know we took a long time to get the review out. Apologies, life is life, and so sometimes it takes longer to do certain things. But that is it for the video. I hope you all enjoyed. I'll catch you guys on the next one. I hope you will see you all day. Y'all stay safe. Be kind to others. Free to be kind. I've been your boy, AnubisArchangel. Enjoy your games. I'll see you when I see you out of here. Deuces.